Welcome back, everybody. So recently on my TikToks, if you haven't followed my TikToks or anything that I do on YouTube, it's all money related stuff so that ultimately the community that we're building here can focus on wealth and having their dollar stretch further for them. And I recently posted a video about how we were going digital and that there are certain countries who are wanting to steer away from the US dollar, if you will. And somebody in my comment section mentioned you should take a look at BRICS. BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. Nothing I've ever heard before. I'd never heard the term before. So I'm pretty fresh to this idea, but my understanding of it is that it's a coalition, if you will, of a bunch of countries that are coming together to basically do trade, like trade amongst themselves. So they're creating like a partnership, if you will, and they're going to be working together. Now, where problems might arise is if they decide to do business amongst themselves, that could take away from the global economy and ultimately take the dollar in a direction where it's no longer the global reserve currency, if you will. So my understanding is that BRICS also has its own currency. So I figured what we would do is there's a video I found on YouTube that we'll go through that explains what BRICS is, and we'll kind of break it down together so that we can both understand it. So let's take a look at this.
Imagine an association between some of the world's most powerful nations, the largest and most influential economies, all in one group. Perhaps they even hold annual summits in which they discuss how they cooperate to achieve their respective goals. Now imagine that the United States of America isn't in this group. In fact,
and that's what somebody was telling me, is that this BRICS organization, I'm sure they'll tell us what countries are in here, but they want to cut the United States out. So, I mean, we'll see.
Neither is Germany, Japan, nor the UK. Confused? Well, don't be. Let me introduce you to the BRICS. So, who are the BRICS? The BRICS is a political and economic organization between 5 member countries formed back in 2009. In fact, the term BRICS is actually an acronym for the participating nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
So I paused it there for a second because I wanted to see what countries were in this. So it's interesting, especially with what's going on in the world right now with Russia and China. Obviously, the United States has put themselves in a position where they're funding the Ukraine and making tension between Russia and the United States. I mean, it hasn't been good anyways, but they're pushing themselves further away to the point where doing business with Russia has almost become impossible. So obviously, we know right now that with that happening and the United States pushing themselves further away, China and Russia have started to do more business. So it's kind of like playing out a little bit, if you will, already. So
the organization was originally known as BRIC, since South Africa only joined in 2010, and as a result gave the organization.
I mean, what does South Africa really have to contribute to this?
So why
I'm
these
not even
nations and not Finland, New
like
Zealand,
what
Djibouti?
types of resources
These
could they
countries
offer?
are home to large emerging economies, with perhaps the exception of South Africa, and all of them have shown high rates of economic growth in recent decades, and are expected to emerge as future powers, not just on a regional level.
See, that's surprising to me. What they're basically saying is that those countries like South Africa, their economy is booming, which I didn't even know. So they're saying that they could potentially be one of the superpowers in the future. Who knew? I had no idea.
In fact, the term BRIC, then just Brazil, Russia, India, and China, is believed to have been coined by a Goldman Sachs employee back in 2001 as a way to refer to these large emerging markets. But why do these nations get together? What's the point of this international organization? Well, let's find out. There are many different reasons that explain the desire for cooperation between the BRICS nations, and perhaps the most important, though, is that of influence. You see, almost all of the large international organizations worldwide have been created by Western economies and allow Western nations to exert their influence through backing each other in economic and diplomatic confrontations. So, if you're a large emerging market that doesn't quite have the influence to sway the likes of the USA or the EU, then one solution is to team up with others. And that's how we've ended up with the BRICS.
Early connection I'm seeing here is that it seems like these are the misfit toys, if you will, of the countries that are not getting the support of the United Nations. So now they're coming together to basically say, hey, we're just as worthy of other countries to get help from the United Nations, so why don't we just team up together to create something like they've created? That's what I'm seeing so far.
The BRICS organization, therefore, is a platform in which member nations can come together to cooperate and design their own framework, one that isn't heavily influenced by the Western powers. So perhaps you're now wondering, why should I care about some recently formed international organization that comprises some of the most populous nations on the planet? Well, let me tell you why. The BRICS nations combined are huge. In fact, if they were their own country, they would be by far the most populous state with almost 3.2 billion people
China
in
has a bunch of
2018.
people.
That's more than 9 times the population of the USA. And together, its economy in 2018 ranked alongside that of the USA and ahead of the EU with a staggering $20.5 trillion US dollars. All numbers surrounding the BRICS are impressive by nature of the group representing a sizable portion of the global population, and many have predicted that the BRICS nations will overtake the largest Western nations in the upcoming decades.
Just a thought I had here with what they said. First and foremost, that's crazy. 20.5 trillion. They're only 0.1% trillion behind the United States. Really impressive, but it does make sense because going through the conflict that we're going through with the Ukraine, we're seeing how much influence Russia has over oil, right? So right there goes to show you that that's huge. But then also you look at China, and China's economy is growing rapidly. I mean, they're saying that by 2035 or so, the Chinese economy will be bigger and produce more than what the United States economy can. So this is something that we've known for a while, but to have those two partnering up, that's bigger than I could have thought.
Both economically and politically, therefore being able to shape global governance as the 21st century progresses. So you may be wondering, what have the BRICS countries achieved so far? Where can their impact be felt?
With Fundrise, you can invest here, from there, or there.
Ever since its first formal summit as a group of 5 nations in April 2011, the BRICS nations have shown their will to cooperate on a variety of issues, ranging from the need for a new global reserve currency, not dominated by these people, to the establishment of a new global financial institution, similar to the IMF and the World Bank. Up until now, the BRICS have been much more successful with the second of these issues.
I mean, that's something I can side with them on, is going away from the IMF, because the IMF, I understand the idea behind the IMF, but the IMF, with what we're seeing with the integration of digital currency and moving toward blockchain technology for finance and how behind the SWIFT system is, it just goes to show the, in my opinion, incompetence of the IMF. So for them to say, hey, we're going to go against them, that I would agree with that. That's a smart move.
As of 2014, such institution became a reality. The new global financial institution in question is the BRICS Development Bank, also known as the New Development Bank or the NDB. This new bank's primary objective is to fund infrastructure projects, and with an initial starting capital of $50 billion, it is definitely not a small-scale institution. Headquartered in Shanghai, China, the New Development Bank had already invested by March 2019 in more than 30 projects, with loans totaling more than $8 billion. And in addition to the NDB,
let's laugh for a second. So they are starting their own bank, and this bank doesn't even use their own currency. They use the US dollar to pay loans. So, I mean, I get the ideology of what you're trying to create, and you're trying to basically do this to spite the West, but then you use the West's currency. Why wouldn't you just use the Chinese dollar? Like, I get that it doesn't have the same value of the US dollar, but that's how you boost its value, is by using it. So,
the
I don't
BRICS
know.
have also set up the BRICS Contingent Reserve Arrangement, or CRA, which is a framework intended to protect against global liquidity pressures. The idea being that many emerging economies go through periods of instability as they experience rapid economic liberalization, and the CRA offers a stable hand to protect against such market volatility by offering liquidity and precautionary instruments. All things considered, and given the relatively short lifespan of the BRICS group, the achievements that the 5 nations have made so far are quite impressive, so much so that other nations have expressed interest in joining the group. With South Africa formally joining the group in 2010, the idea that the BRICS members are set in stone is up for debate, and many other countries have been knocking on the door, such as Turkey, with its President Erdogan suggesting that the group could change its name to BRICS and allow his country to join. But perhaps the acceptance of South Africa in 2010 is puzzling in itself, with more populous and faster emerging economies in Africa such as Nigeria, Ethiopia and Egypt perhaps being better suited to assume the responsibility of being the group's presence in Africa. That said, whichever nation is invited or accepted to join the group in the future, it will most likely be another emerging economy and regional power, therefore leaving the door open to many countries such as Indonesia, Mexico and Nigeria. However, enlarging the group could cause more harm than good, as not all nations get along. This is evident even within the 5-nation group.
But here's the issue, though, and I agree with what they're saying with the expansion of it basically could jeopardize the agreements that they have, right? Like, it makes sense. But you're limiting yourself. If you're trying to create something as big as what the Western world has, you're limiting yourself by saying we're only going to allow X number of countries in. And ultimately what that's going to do is it's going to cap how much trading can go on between those countries. So I don't think that would be a good idea. I think, yes, you need to keep order in it, but you need to have some sort of like bylaws to keep order and not restrict the number of countries that ultimately can get in.
What binds the BRICS nations together is the desire for more independence, influence, and not having to rely on Western institutions. However, there are also many differences that divide the BRICS nations, from their political systems to their relationships with the West. That said, perhaps the most divisive force within the BRICS nations is actually the relationship between its 2 largest members, China and India. You see, China and India aren't exactly best friends. They have conflicting territorial claims in the Himalayas, and in 2020 we have even seen conflict at the border between the 2 countries, resulting in military deaths, as well as some Indians boycotting Chinese firms. In addition, the Chinese have invested heavily in Pakistan in recent years as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, a move that India is not completely happy with. And as for India, its positive relationship with the USA is a cause of concern to the Chinese, since Chinese-US relations are spicy, to say the least. So such tangling of international relationships does not exactly create the fruitful relationship that China and India need to sustainably boost the BRICS cooperation. And without its two largest member states, there isn't much the rest of the group can do. The BRICS may not be an economic union, but as a result of their enormous size, both demographically and economically, they have the ability to play a significant role in the global economy in the coming decades, and therefore are definitely worth keeping an eye on. Recent tensions between China and India will no doubt slow down progress between the group in the short term, and as the group progresses throughout the 21st century, I'd expect its economic clout to grow and rival that of the Western Hemisphere as a whole. But divisions between the nations and their divided relationship towards Western countries may prove difficult for the group to overcome.
Okay, so that was BRICS. First time that I've heard anything about what they're doing and the actual premise behind it and the idea behind it. And first thoughts are, it's interesting. I think it makes sense. I think that between Russia and China, they have this need to be one of the world's superpowers, so much so that it makes sense for them to team up to try to be known as a world superpower. Some of those other countries getting involved into it, like, again, South Africa, India makes sense to me. South Africa, I didn't really get that. I guess their economy is big, but I could see how it would definitely benefit them to be in BRICS, because if you're doing business with a company like China, but you're also able to get oil from a country like Russia, that is going to help your economy massively for the cost of goods. So that makes total sense to me. But my final thought with all of this is it seems like this is a group of countries who are trying to be as big as the Western world to spite the Western world. Why don't you just create a partnership with the Western world? Like, I know our political systems are different and our ideologies are different, but you're ultimately competing against something that's been established for a while. And although the US might seem like it's not going in the best of directions right now, it still is the world's #1 economy and still is the world reserve currency. And that's because countries feel and they believe in what the United States is doing. Now, that could flip in the future, obviously, but my whole thing when it comes to money and investing and things like that is if you can't beat them, join them, right? And I know China has an opportunity to become the world's biggest economy, 10 years, 20 years down the road, something like that is what they're speculating. But the issue still becomes infrastructure. With their political system and the fact that they don't have a lot of friends out there, that's going to hurt their growth, if you will. So why not combat that by putting those differences aside and saying, hey, even though our political system isn't perfect, we're going to create these partnerships to ultimately help boost our economy and help boost the economy of other countries as well. Because then other countries are going to start to buy into what you have as well, which will ultimately help the growth. You may still play second fiddle, but at least you're on the field at that point. So I don't know. That's just what I think about the whole situation after reviewing BRICS. But you guys tell me what you think in the comments below. And also, this is kind of a newer idea. Like I said, BRICS was something I'd never heard of before, and I wanted to explore it, but I wanted to explore it with you guys and really just figure things out on the fly. So if you do like these videos, when I do these explanation videos and kind of go through the information with you, let me know in the comments below, and I'll start putting out more types of these videos. And of course, if you have anything else that you think I should look into and do some research on, and again, we'll do it as a community, Also, let me know that in the comments below. And if you are interested in joining a community of people who learn more about money, learn more about the global economy as we did in this case, and ultimately just having your dollar stretch further for you, this is definitely the channel for you. So make sure that you smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. Other than that, have a great rest of your day.